Hi, the world's most wicked problems need innovative solutions. Join me in this show to meet leaders, pathbreakers, and visionaries who solve these problems. Not just solve them, but they've solved it at scale. When you join me, you're going to listen to their lives, the problems they solved, and the fun they had doing it. Hi, folks. Ready to start? Okay, this show is called the Wicked Solutions. So we take wicked problems, in this case storytelling, and you wonder why is that a wicked problem? Because many times wicked problems itself need to be told as stories. And I believe you are all folks finding solutions for that wicked problem because storytelling is never easy and the social sector storytelling is even more complex. And we will examine why and how each of you would like to advise what we would find very important to do, but is also difficult to do, right? So I'm going to start off the questions with Sudhir. Sudhir, from a perspective of being in the industry, comms, and then into social development, what is the why for you in storytelling?
Sorry, come again?
What is the why? Why should the storytelling be so important?
So, thanks. And just to give you a brief background, as they've mentioned that I've been in the communication industry for about 28 odd years and then moved into the development sector. So clearly I come from a thinking of what they say, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. Only if you talk about your product or service does it sell. And I think it holds as much for the work that we do in the development sector. But having come into the sector and part of an organization, and Ashna and I were conversing, one of our founders clearly believed that, good work should speak for itself. The sector believes that you don't need to talk about your work because you're doing good work, so people will appreciate and people will support you. Versus the other co-founder of our organization, he said, Jungle mein mor nacha kisne dekha? If you are doing all your work in a lot of forest areas and a lot of tribal areas, then if you don't speak about it, nobody's going to know about it. And if you want people to kind of participate, development work is clearly a participatory, collaborative work. So if people don't know what you are doing, how you are doing, then it's extremely difficult to, really make people understand. And, I then experienced a couple of other people. One of them was a development apprentice, who had joined the organization just about 6-7 months back. And he used to say कि जब भी मैं घर जाता हूँ तो मेरा बाप कहता है कि ये देख मेरा बावला बेटा आ गया. पता नहीं क्या करता है ये, कुछ घूमता रहता है, कुछ करता रहता है. तो मैंने बहुत कोशिश करी उनको समझाने की. But now I've given up. क्योंकि मुझे समझाना नहीं आता उनको कैसे हम क्या करते हैं. So as you said, the work is very complex. But then I told him, I said, yeah, but your family needs to know what you are doing. Just doing the good work is not good because you want them to be your allies. You want them to feel proud of you and talk about the work that you do because that's how people will come around. So that was clearly one of the areas we thought we have to kind of actively invest. So as much as the work that you do, I think you need to talk about it. To a conversation I had with a very senior development professional, Rajesh Tandon, who heads Priya. So he mentioned that about, he comes from IIT background and IIM. So he says one of the IIT get-togethers, 40-45 years passing out, we met and people said, कि हाँ तो राजेश क्या करते हो? So I told him कि I run this Priya, ये वो. हाँ वो तो ठीक है, पर करते क्या हो? तो वैसे क्या करते हो? So they thought that was just a pastime that he was doing. I think the work does not get taken seriously. People don't appreciate the nuance behind it. The fact that you need a lot of professionals behind it, and we also therefore need to attract a lot of professionals to come into the sector. And therefore, I think communication is extremely important.
Absolutely. Just using your own term, जो बिकता है वो भी दिखता है ना? And that the circular logic also makes the popular more popular.
Right. Absolutely.
And that part, I think you reminded me of a story Dr. Kurian told us when we were young students in IRMA. He said, I couldn't get a girl to marry because I couldn't explain what I do.
Right.
And if he couldn't explain what he could do, I think we are all pretty much juniors to him. But I just want to park this issue, Sudhir. Is this only the problem of the communicator, or is this the problem of the receiver also? Because we like archetypes, right? जोलने वाला NGO है, ये government में काम करके बाबू है. So we have these archetypes. I just want to park that with you as I move to Rajiv and ask the same question. Rajiv, from your long experience, why is storytelling, particularly for the social sector, important?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Shiv. I'll come to that a bit later, but before that, I would add to what Sudhir said and you also referred to. Just to step back, I come from communication, media, and development sector. I've been working through all these organizations. So one of my previous organizations was ICT for development. Now, ICT for development, it's very difficult to even communicate to babus. When it was registered, they would not believe what this is. They couldn't understand. They refused to register it as a Section 8 company, Section 25 company. That's one part. Second is how to communicate. Now, I had a young guy working with me who was an engineer, and one day he told me very casually that he's not being able to marry because his family back home in Chennai is not able to find a girl for him because they're not able to tell people what is he doing actually. And then later on, we came out with a book on community radio sector. So I told Satish, I said, Satish, you write a chapter, we shall go with it. Satish was reluctant, he said, sir, aap likhiye. But I just joined the organization, I didn't know much about the sector. I said, you are the best person, you've done it, and you please write it. Anyway, very reluctantly he wrote a chapter. And then we also used his photograph. We also used his photograph along with it, which he was again doubly reluctant in front of a senior, his photograph going. But anyway, I convinced him. And then he went home and came back. He said, sir, aapne mera jaan bacha liya aur meri shaadi ho rahi hai. I said, what happened? He said, I showed this compendium to my parents. They saw my photograph and they could understand what I'm doing. So the message essentially is that it's not about recipient or the person who's delivering. It is also about how you're doing it actually. That's critically important. Not that they could understand what ICT is. They could only see that, okay, his photograph is there, he's doing a respectable job, and his article is there, his name is there. That was it. So that's very critically important to communicate in a manner the recipient understands it. The second thing is what you asked about is storytelling part. You see, there is so much of deluge of information, knowledge in today's world. I need not say that. Now, what does stick really? It's a very key kind of a question. What does stick? It's only the stories. It's only the experiences that really you remember, the faces you put to people. Otherwise, the information keeps on going, knowledge keeps on coming and going, but it's only stories you remember, whether it's from childhood or later on as we grow up. Also, to put another context to this, for example, we're today at this conference. After a few years, how many people would remember exactly what were the deliberations? But they would definitely remember the experience. Okay, it's a big mega event. The scope was big. The khana was good. Khane mein kya tha, ye yaad nahi rahega. But they will remember the experience part of it, which C.K. Prahlad used to say, I'm sure some of you would know, the toy experiment, which he used to talk about very frequently. So he convinced one manufacturer to not sell toys in a store, but just sell the parts of toys. Put them there and let customers come and assemble them and make their own toys. And it was a very hit. I mean, of course, CKP could do this and get away with it, and it did sell, of course, maybe partly on his name also. But people would remember the experience. They don't remember the toys, actually. So that experience bit is very important. That experience comes from the story. And that's why stories are very important, and how they're told would be the next step.
Absolutely. Before Ashna gets the view that men are only communicating to get girls to marry, I think, Ashna, you have a very unique experience in our panel. I think you're coming from a legal background, and DI is one of your key focus areas. For you, why is storytelling a critical part? Although it may sound very obvious, I would like to establish that and go around it.
Thank you. So I'm going to answer this more from my public health, but also the DEI and legal background. I think storytelling is important for a couple of reasons. One, the stories we tell and the stories we believe can take lives. And we're watching that happen in Palestine right now. That a certain predominant narrative that exists is making it okay for a genocide to unfold right in front of us. and we're buying, most of us seem to either buy into that or not know what to do to change that narrative. Lives depend on the stories we tell and the stories we believe. And the second, which comes from my work in the TB space, which is tuberculosis is a very stigmatized disease, as you know. Either people think it's already gone because they confuse it with polio, or, or it's like, oh my God. I mean, it's okay to drop bombs on people, but you have TB, that's where we draw the line. With TB, what happened was we work with this collective called Survivors Against TB, and that's basically TB survivor-led work on advocating for better care. And the way we started it was through survivor stories. And what those stories tell you, it's not some kind of inspiration porn. It's always turned into that, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is you're not alone. This does happen. These are the challenges. So it gives you the dignity of this is my existence and I'm owning it. But it also brings out the lived experience and the grassroots experience you need to identify what the wicked problems are and then solve for them. So it's not just a feel-good moment in the sun. So for these two reasons, storytelling is very critical.
Right. I love that. It's about the stories we tell ourselves also. Sometimes we don't tell anyone else, which can be, which is probably the worst. You reminded me of a few things. Let me try to forget them. Ankur, rolling over to you. It'll be great to hear about, your current work and experience, and as well as, from your perspective, why storytelling is important.
Yeah, I actually think about this question quite a lot. In every story that I have written, every story that I edit at Queerbeat or CNN, I strongly believe that stories engage the consciousness of people. Stories help people feel seen. They become even more powerful when they are told by the people who are at the center of the problem that their communities are facing and experiencing. There is more belief. Stories help in agency building. When people see characters in the stories move from place A to place B, overcome challenges, they feel that they can also do so. There is more empowerment through the stories. And just broadly, stories help you make sense of the very complex world you live in. And I remember reading a data point, I don't know how true is that, because I don't have a source for it, but I read somewhere that people remember stories 10 times more than the facts alone. So I feel like they have the power to stick with you.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. In fact,
I just want to add, Ankur told me some time back that he almost settled somewhere in Africa because there were excellent stories to be told there. So that's his relationship with stories.
I personally think many African cultures, storytelling is beautiful. And one beautiful thing somebody told me is that they said, trust comes in walk and goes away galloping in a horse. Now, it's such a simple statement, but it powerfully tells. No, absolutely, Ankur. One other thing I wonder is also whether storytelling is also catharsis. I've seen that when I talk to sex workers that I work with, and when I ask them, what's your life story? It's a lot of tears, because nobody wants to be a sex worker. And it's, at the end of it, many times they thank you, because nobody even asks them and listens as to what is their life story empathetically, right? And sometimes I've seen catharsis for them is sometimes, I'm not saying always, is also an important factor. Ankur, let me move a little bit further to the next kind of a topic that I would like to start off with you. As winds of change. Media is changing enormously, right? We have new media, Rajiv, we've been talking about it in terms of, there was 10 years, 15 years, 20 years back, the communication mechanism we had and what we have now, there's huge change. The business models are changing, the inflows are changing, and the social sector is changing. So could you reflect a little bit on the changes on both sides, both the media as well as the civil society side, and tell us what do you think both need to do for the changes?
Right. I will, on the media side, I'll speak from the perspective of the marginalized communities, that's what I represent. Media is a huge space, and I'm a small part of it. What I see now happening, and I'm very excited about this, is the rise of new media outlets which are led by marginalized communities. My own company, Queerbeat. You look at Mook Nayak, which covers Dalit issues. You look at Dalit Dastak, again covering Dalit issues. There are new disability magazines that are coming up. The question is that why they are coming up. They are coming up, or why I started Queerbeat, is because historically speaking, we were not represented in the media. We did not find our stories represented in the media. And if they were represented, they were underrepresented or misrepresented. So we needed to correct the narrative and claim the space, which all of these organizations are doing, and there is a massive amount of solidarity amongst us. It's a challenge to the mainstream media. And the way we are all doing it, we are very excited about it. So that's one change that I see happening in media. It's also addressing the trust deficit that existed between the mainstream media and when they covered the vulnerable communities or marginalized communities. We somewhere, this is what I hear from marginalized communities, is that we somewhere lost trust on the mainstream media because their practices were extractive or they came to us with certain agendas, did not represent us accurately. So we needed to take the narrative in our own hand. So that's one change I'm excited about. B is just that media now seems more democratic in a sense that there is rise of more independent media outlets who are speaking truth to power, holding powerful people, whether it's politics or government, more accountable. I'd say it's mostly the new digital scroll wire that are doing it than the mainstream media. These two changes I'm really excited about, and just while social media is a double-edged source, it's working great on the distribution side, getting the stories out there. Last point I'd add is that I'm excited about, or the change that I see happening more is collaborations. These collaborations between independent media outlets, collaborations between funding agencies and independent journalists, collaborations between CSOs and media, they are changing the narrative.
Yeah, no, just on that alone, Ankur, again, the point which I want you to reflect on later is the new media, is it about polarization and extreme views? Is that how it sells? Or, that's only one point of view. I just wanted to park that with you to come back. And then, Ashna, to you, I think the winds of change, how do you see it? What's the positive? What's the negative?
So I think in terms of the positive, there's definitely a lot more democratization, as Ankur pointed out, right? That marginalized communities can now, because of the democratized means of media, tell their stories and tell them with the dignity they deserve. But in terms of just the things, because I was actually thinking about the polarization when you mentioned it, I forget who the source is, but I think there's this old journalism story where it's like if one person tells you it's raining and the other one tells you it's not, what would you do? And this person seemed a little sad. They're like, what would I do? And they're like, you check the window. You'd open the window and see if it's raining. You don't believe either person on face value. And I think in terms of the polarization, it's raining, it's not, nobody bothers to check through direct experience what it actually is out there. It's very easy for us to get to be pro this and against that. And we're so busy just taking those stands that I feel like we forget to just exist and collaborate and come together and tell stories or create the impact that we need to. So I think the one change I definitely like to see is, one, open the window and check if it's raining.
Right.
Two, when we talk about affected or marginalized communities, this happens both with media and CSOs, we talk about giving them a voice. I'd like to see that stop. They have a voice. Just give them the mic and a seat at the table. So, thank you.
Thank you. Wow. You really poked me on that one, because when I got my new phone, I was so excited it showed that it was raining. and my wife said, you can look outside, right? And I was so excited, the screen was showing droplets, and I was jumping up and down as a techie. So thank you for that. And just what you made me think about another aspect is that, does the new age media make you think or close your mind? Does it make you take positions, or does it actually make you think? Because the brevity of the messages also have, it's coming down. Our patience to consume more than 7 words is really problematic now, right? And it's nobody's blame. All of us are like that. We shouldn't tell everybody. So just a thought, I want to leave that and come back to you. Rajiv, over to you. Winds of change.
Well, I think they said it very clearly that there are some positives and negatives. I think I'll just look at a few things quickly. One is that we always like past more than the present. And I'm reminded of one anecdote I have read somewhere when, no, this goes back to Nehru. I'm not that old. So Nehru once said that Nehru also talked about his past.
Right.
So he says that earlier, media used to write, newspapers, not media, it was only newspapers. Newspapers used to write about something and we would debate in the parliament. Now what happens is, what we talk about, newspapers write on that. So the media has changed, been changing always. That's part one. And part two is, as part of that, it has tried to evolve along with as the society has changed, but its business models have not evolved or developed or delivered, unfortunately. So that has put an additional pressure on it. Thirdly, it is also in the process also lost trust because of what television has particularly done. So media's trust deficit is very high, unfortunately. But at the same time, the positives are in terms of new media. Democratization, as they said, very important. Now, media is in people's hands actually. So they don't have to really depend upon a newspaper, not even a TV channel for the matter. So they're as good as the media actually. So the communication has become much easier, simpler, participatory also. And also they're also setting agenda. Now the problem here comes in what you asked Ashna just now is probably, is about whether it makes you to take positions. Now the machine decides what I have to read actually. Now that is the problem. I don't get an overview and a choice to do what I should do. So once the machine has figured out what I like, it will always keep on delivering that to me. And I'll only get stuck in that part. I don't have time, I don't have patience, and probably I don't even want to do that. So that perspective is unfortunately compromised many times. So if I like, say if I like cricket, I'll get 24/7, I'll only be inundated as if the whole world is about cricket. I wouldn't know anything else, unfortunately. So that's a bit of a challenge there. And also, while as I understand that there are partnerships happening, but they're happening at a very minuscule level. The need is at a much larger level. And we did have in Bangalore, of course, IP, what do you call this? That foundation by Neil Kenny's and others who tried. Unfortunately, I don't think they have been able to continue much beyond what they've done initially. It was wonderful work they did. So we need that kind of scale actually. And multiple of them. As a big country, one organization doesn't mean much. So you need to have hundreds of such organizations, hundreds of funding agencies to really support the new media. The other thing I still find that even government media, even today, whether it's Doordarshan or All India Radio, they're still much better if you discount for the government factor. You'll get a larger picture, you'll get a better picture, you'll get a decent picture. You can get a news which you can watch with family. That's an amazing thing. So you just discount, put in that error margin, 10%, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. But you still get a perspective. So I would say that it's all good and bad, so we need to figure out, we have lots of choices, but we need to make those choices.
Right.
That's where we're lacking actually at this point, and we have everything available.
No, that's a super important point you're making. If I watch an accident by any chance and then I swipe and watch another accident, I think the algorithm decides I like accidents and feeds me all day and all week accidents, right? And that then narrows my scope of what my world view comes down to those accidents. And I just, Rajiv, again, some thoughts on you now or later around how does one zoom out and how do civil society organizations who many times have to tell a bad story to raise money, right? And not necessarily a good story to support. Any quick thoughts on that, or should I come back to you?
I think what we need to do is partnerships in terms of not only funding, we also need in terms of knowledge sharing. We need in terms of capacity building, training, sensitization. Now, I heard it, yes, day before yesterday, we spoke probably yesterday also, that mainstream does not cover, say, marginalized issues, vulnerability issues, or minority issues. Very true, but it's also true of the general society in general, and media is only a reflection of that. It's not that media is doing it deliberately. At the end of the day, I can assure everyone here, what does a media man want at the end of, media man or person or woman want at the end of the day? He or she wants a good story. It doesn't matter whether it comes from the marginalized communities or the mainstream or film or wherever. They want a good story, which is not a positive story necessarily, most of the time not actually. So that story matters to them more than anything else. And here the challenge comes about access to those sectors of community, those consciences, also understanding of issues. There's no sensitivity in, it's not only media, it's about general public.
Yeah.
We've seen this happen in the Supreme Court over the LGBT issues. Now people have started realizing what's happening and what should be happening or what's right or wrong. And even then, we're not able to take positions there.
Right.
So it's a long journey.
So you're saying media is also a reflection of the society as much as the other way around, right? So they're going to, winds of change, once you entered Pradhan and saw it up front, and the market is changing for the social sector, the market is changing for the media. I wonder, because you come from a corporate background, I wanted to roll this question to you. You take IPL, and if you were to compare to Test cricket several years back, now the players are earning more, the groundsmen are earning more, everybody is making more money, and you can credit it to a format, right? Is the challenge really the lack of a format of partnership, right, where everybody wins, or media by its definition and its structure needs to be more independent, and maybe a format around that is more important? Just some thoughts from you.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. I think one of the big things that, I and a lot of professionals like me face is this whole fragmentation of media. I think we are finding it extremely difficult, and maybe because people like me come from an earlier generation, we are finding it extremely difficult to understand, especially if you have different audiences to reach out to. How do you reach your audience effectively? I think as an organization, and perhaps as a sector also, we've evolved well to develop great content. But how do we ensure that the content and your stories reach your audiences is something, at least I have not come across any study which clearly tells me on what to choose and how to choose. And the other is, as Rajiv was also mentioning, from the readers and audience point of view, their attention levels are very low. Now, whether a good story will work or a bad story will work is also something that we are all struggling with. My sense has been that more sensationalism has been able to sell. We have brilliant good stories to tell. I'm carrying some of them myself. I find it difficult to get people to pick up those and sell those. A lot of people like us believe that there is a lot of possibility in positive stories. There is a lot of positive momentum that can build, and people will want to join that. But our sense is that sensationalism still sells. So that's what we are struggling with. I don't think we want to talk about the miseries and challenges necessarily of our communities. A lot of organizations, in fact, have that policy of not talking about it. But that's a struggle. How do you sell a positive story without necessarily looking at the negative side or overplaying the negative? So that's something that we struggle. And as I said, how do you choose the media? My sense also is, and some of us were talking day before yesterday, and Rajiv mentioned it, there might be a little bit of laziness also on the media side. I'm not too sure whether, because everything happens online, digital, press of a button, a lot of people are not necessarily wanting to experience what is happening on the ground. And Ankur mentioned, I think some of the communities can tell great stories, but I'm not too sure whether a lot of media, and maybe that's why they've kind of started their own, own channel. And we do that also. Sometimes we've created our own channels. We are not too sure whether it's reaching enough people, but at least it's helping us tell the story the way we want to, and at least then find ways to reach it to at least our, group of audiences. So that's something that we are, I think, faced with.
Oh, that's great. I think, once somebody told me, you need to do elevator pitch. And my story is so complicated. I said, let's go to Burj Khalifa. Because that would be the time when we reach the top, I can tell you the full story. Ankur, going back to polarization, what are your thoughts? I mean, is that a play at all, or what's your take on this?
Before I come to polarization, I want to talk a bit about the audience that Sudhir was talking about. We often say that we don't know what the audience want, or there isn't enough understanding what the audience want. But my question is, how much we as media entrepreneurs or people who work in the media or in the social sector asking the audience, what do you want? Now I think there is this understanding beginning in the media or social sector is that we don't know what do the audience want. So we need to then do the next step, ask them, what kind of format works for you? What kind of stories do you want? Do you want a long story? Do you want a short story? Do you want a video in between? Do you want audio? How do you generally consume it? I think we just need to engage more and more with the audience. Talk to them. We have been in the business of telling, not listening. We need to now reverse it. We need to listen first, and then based on then tell. We kind of think that we know how to tell the stories best. We know what kind of stories work. We need to drop that arrogance.
I think sometimes, yes, just want to add, sometimes you have to caught up with the story because we believe we have such a brilliant story to tell. Oh, you got to like it. I mean, come on. Of course you like it. I mean.
Yeah, exactly. You just need to trust the reader. They may completely reject that story. Has happened with all of us.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say that just talk to the audience more.
Right.
Then coming back to the polarization point, I think it's true. A lot of studies, media studies have captured it, that there is polarization and it is confusing the audience. They don't know what to believe, which news is true. Some still decide to stick to the medium that they have been traditionally consuming. Sometimes despite even knowing that it may not be serving the right news. But then we also see, which the surveys are showing a new pattern, is that the audience is also becoming smart in figuring out where do I get my news from, where do I go, which news served me best, which media outlet is serving me more. We used earlier surveys like 3 years ago, this Reuters survey said that people are not reading enough, but the new survey shows that people are. They have figured where to get the news from. So I think that's also happening at the same time.
Right.
The audience is realizing that their polarization, they have figured it, and they are now making their own choices.
Okay. I want to go back to what I parked with you, which is about are we closing our minds or opening our minds particularly with the new media?
So I think also taking off, I'm going to answer that, just taking off from where the conversation is. I think new media, and I don't want to club all of media under this, specifically the parts of media that are polarizing or trying to sensationalize stuff. I think it's a distraction game. Like, just keep you distracted enough so you don't really focus on what's going on out there. But also, other than polarization, there's something else that's happening, which is that we're becoming paralyzed because there's so much of fear being communicated. And I don't mean to endorse toxic positivity or that we live in this bubble where everything is great. But if everything was garbage, the world would not be spinning on its axis. And we don't hear those stories enough. So new media in some ways there's always an agenda. One, it depends on who is telling the story and why they're telling it and to what end is something I would look at, because that's one way to sort of see what you're getting from that. Second is, even if it's a bad story, as you said, there's a way to tell a bad story. There's a purpose for it. Is that story helping someone live a better life? Is it bringing something to the fore? Or are you just exploiting that?
Is it respectful?
Is it respectful? Is it coming from the person? The first time I disclosed publicly that I have TB, I wrote my story for Scroll. And Scroll did not edit anything from it except for like a byline. There's minor byline change, some lines here and there. And the first time that I got to do that with the publication, I wrote for them later on as a writer on policy issues. But my story, when I wrote that myself, that was a very different take.
Right.
And when I was putting that out there, because I'm a woman and because I came out as someone having TB, they asked me, why do you want to put this out there? And it was just to leave someone less lonely. So it does deal with the aspects of pain and all of that, but that's not the end of the story. It can't end there. It has to be in service of life going forward.
Right. And as Ankur says, give the mic
Yeah.
to the right person, right? We are running out of time, and I want to go back to a very critical input I want from all four of you. Many civil societies don't have large budgets. In fact, many of them struggle to have budgets. And for them to allocate sufficiently to communication is a real struggle, particularly if they don't fully understand which one to choose and how much would it cost, what is the returns to it. So I want to start with you, Rajiv. What's the advice you will give to civil society, particularly those who don't have the resources to invest? What can they and should they be doing? And it could mean raising more resources also, but what would your advice be?
You see, what we need to figure out is that everybody is short on resources generally. Media is also short, and society is also, and civil society is also short on resources. So what we have tried to do at various levels is co-creation of content. Now, just to give you an example, I worked very closely with community radio sector. I don't know how many of you are familiar with. This is non-commercial FM sector. There are around 500 radio stations in the country which are run by NGOs or educational institutions or Krishi Vigyan Kendras. There's no big corporate involvement here. So no budgets, nothing. So what we had, and they work in different local communities. They're very limited reach, kind of 10, 15 kilometer kind of a reach, which their transmitter gives them. So we worked very closely with them to co-create content, which comes at a, so you have people on the field, your stories there, you only help them to package it, bring it together, and disseminate it. So that's one way of getting involved here. And this co-creation of content I've seen is not only done, is also done by big organizations. Now, I work with a big media house. Here we do co-creation of content with UN agencies. So now this is not necessarily news. This is content. And I think that is what this civil society really wants. They're not into business of news necessarily. So that content can be created and doesn't necessarily have a high cost. With UN agencies, we may have a higher cost, but with the civil society at the grassroots level, there is no cost, hardly any cost. So these are ways and means of doing it. Right. I told the other day, media fellowships were tried very well. And we've seen organizations like Akshay Patra, which is as big as a corporate, get some international funding on the basis of that kind of work also. That's also doable. And you don't have to plant stories, you don't have to lobby, you don't have to do anything. You have to let your work speak for itself through a third-party independent entity.
Right.
And it does work. So there are different models available. It's not that they're not available.
So you're saying don't give up the models available?
No, the models are there. We need to keep on trying and testing and seeing what works for who.
Sure.
Another model we tried, where we didn't succeed actually, is that we got a group of friends, we got in touch with a few civil society organizations. We told them that you don't have communication budgets, you can't afford a communication person. We'll put together a platform for you guys. You just become members and of course cross-subsidize it with a smaller amount. And then we also had a model of Ola, Uber. We said we'll also disseminate it to larger number of NGOs back. But there were not many takers, unfortunately.
Right. I conceptualized something similar, and it didn't even move beyond conceptualization. And you're absolutely right. I think looking at new media like FM, looking at collaboration, I hear is two critical areas. Sudhir, what's your advice to smaller NGOs and CBOs?
I haven't had too much experience in a small NGO, but I can tell you that I think there is no other option but to sell the concept of communication. I think a lot more budgets, program budgets, need to include communication as a critical piece. I think people need to understand and appreciate, and I've shared this experience with some of you earlier, that talking about your work is as important as about doing the work. So what you learned from it, what was positive, what was negative, what are the failures. I think it's critical because if people don't share amongst each other, learn from each other, that's a big miss. That's a larger loss of development rupee than kind of saving it for communication. So if you share that, it's far better. The other is also, I think, a sense of pride. I think a lot of people in this sector, because they come from a background that they believe that, they kind of underplay their roles, I think is not a good thing to happen. A lot of people in corporates, for example, are perhaps not appreciated for the work they do. A lot of people don't even know what work they are doing. Now, I think we need to create that sense of pride and ownership that you need to tell your story for you to be appreciated. I think you need to tell your story for your own family to appreciate yourself. I think my kids, my family, I've never seen me so excited than when I was in 2018. And I said, did some great work in corporate, some fantastic brands, and yeah. But they've never seen me so excited because the kind of work that we do in the development sector, the kind of people that you meet, and the stories that you share brings a lot of sense of pride and joy. So I think we need to continuously push for it. So I would say more on that. And then, as I said, a lot of the programs, a lot of people are now beginning to understand the need of communication. And I said, from a point of view of learning from each other, Ankur mentioned that there needs to be a lot more collaboration. Well, you have to share your work. If you have to collaborate, then you have to share your work, you have to share your vision, you have to share your theory of change. So till people understand where you are coming from, what you are doing, I think it will be very difficult to do that.
Absolutely.
And I think that is more money wasted. You are, you are trying to save the penny and you are wasting much more money. So I think people need to understand the importance of that. And then, as we said, if you create some good content, and I think money finds, good ideas will find their own money and finance.
You're saying prioritize it, then the money should follow it.
Yes.
Without which you will probably lose more money. I just got reminded of Odisha's tourism punchline. Have you folks seen it? Because they've never promoted it.
Okay.
The promotional punchline is best kept secret. Right? It's an interesting way to play the same thing back, right? And Ankur, over to you. What's the advice you would give for community-based organization, particularly from marginalized communities?
Right. So one thing that I've seen work, so I'll just talk about that and something that I have tried doing, and I'll come back again to collaboration. What we did recently is collaborated with a disability organization to do a bunch of stories, and then at the same time collaborated with a bunch of media outlets, both big and small, local, to create content, the stories together. The disability group brought in their own expertise of how to tell the stories. They completely challenged our idea of how we were constructing the narratives, how we think that good stories, how they should be written, what is the narrative arc of the stories, the character moves from one place to... We had our rosy ideas. They did not want any of it. They said that we are a disability group. We need simple storytelling. Tell us in bullet points. There is something called simple language in disability community. So we had to throw our ideas out of the window, listen to them, create content in the way that worked for them. And a bunch of media outlets did resource sharing in terms of somebody contributed editing, somebody contributed funding, outlet A paid the writer, outlet B paid the designer. That's how we created content, and then we collaborated with local media outlets, so the stories got translated, they got distributed. I felt like it was a good experiment. We learned a lot from it, worked for us.
Okay, you're really pressing the button on collaboration, I hear you.
Yes.
Ashna.
Thank you.
Final
so
word.
I'm not going to talk about collaboration because it's already been spoken of, but I do want to talk about the fact that we said there's a scarcity of resources. I don't think so. I think there's a lack of prioritization. I think there's a hoarding of resources, not by the CSOs or media, but generally in society. And if we try to pump in, of course we need more budgets for communication, but that's a short-term solution because you'd still want to go back to why is this important, right? And for the CSOs, I've worked on both sides. I've done comms and I have been part of the grassroots work. We really need to get over this hangover. We have a PR nahi karna hai. We don't want to do PR. And I was like, okay, do you want to communicate the impact of your work? And they're like, yeah, we want to do that. I was like, that's PR. That's public relations. You're working for the public, with the public. If you're not talking to them, what's the point? That's one. That's for the CSOs. For the media, when we're looking at what sells or the algorithm or the trends, those are very short-lived. Why are you in this? You're in this to build communities, to be able to tell stories, to be able to make impact. And impact always has got to be long-term and sustainable. So going back to the why would be a good place to start. Thank you.
Thank
Just
you.
want to add to what Ashna was saying, and and as she mentioned, it's not about funds. So an organization like Pradhan, which has been around, when I joined about 35 odd years already there, did not see it necessary to talk about their work. So when I went and saw some of their work, I said, this stuff is brilliant. I mean, how come too many people know about it? And I think half of you people should be getting Nobel Prizes. And they started laughing. I said, no, I'm not kidding. You guys are doing brilliant work. So they said, you know what? You're very good at our work. We stay focused, we are very heads down, and we focus on our work. If you really think if this is talking about, why don't you go ahead and do it? So at least I think they made that move. They said, we can't do it. But later on, we tried and build a lot of internal capacity. I again think that doesn't necessarily work. Because I think a lot of people who are recruited in the organizations did not come to tell stories. They do some job well. So you might want to bring in those priority and bring in that money and hire some people who can actually do it well. The content may come from somebody, but how to tell that story can make a big difference. And my sense is that over the 5 years, the organization has said, what somebody was saying, that just reporting on what the organization is doing to actually kind of telling the organization what could be important to do and therefore what would be important to talk about. Right. So clearly communications has moved from a reporting kind of or strategy or statutory requirement to a very strategic kind of front end operations, and that's happened in a large organization, very happy of how it existed. And I would sense that smaller organizations would feel the itch more to do more of this because they need to go faster.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ankur, Ashna, Rajiv, Sudhir, thank you very much. I think time is very short, but lots and lots of interesting guidances, particularly to civil society, and also a deeper understanding of how media works and civil society works towards storytelling. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the audience to join me in giving them a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Shiv, we're also opening the segment for the audience if they want to share something on storytelling, because we obviously heard how we need to engage the audience. Yes. May I also request you all to just move in front so that we're all able to be captured on video. Thank you.
There are special awards if you sit in the first 3 seats. Any questions, any comments, anything which resonated with you, anything you disagree?
Is everyone in a food coma?
We worked with the community radio and we got the best community radio award in 2016. We are working with the community radio stations. So and our
introduce yourself.
I'm Naveen Jha representing ISAP India Foundation. So we are running a community radio station in 2011 onwards at Madhya Pradesh Vidisha district. And they got the best community radio station award in 2016. And it was funded till only 2013. From there onwards, it's sustainable to some extent. Our, of course, resources goes into that. And we have a really very good content created. We created local songs during COVID. We have a lot of agriculture experts coming in, giving a lot of advice to the farmers. We have lots more local services also. We are running only 4 hours at community radio stations. But no media covered that story so far. Although we made a story also in that from our limited resources. We don't have a comm team as bigger institutions like. But we tried to publish this to even the local newspapers sometimes covered it. But apart from the local and MP newspapers, no takers for that story. So, any guidance how to make this story to make a bigger one?
The story story is about ISAP, not about the community radio station here. And I think ISAP has been, it's a big organization, it's not as any small anyway. And ISAP has been getting good media coverage generally whenever it does some work. I don't agree with you. The community radio station may not have got the coverage, but that's a separate issue. At the same time, I have seen community radio station in Uttarakhand getting damn good coverage, in South getting coverage. Maybe you're not reaching out to people. Now, I'll give another small example here. So this for you, not to be taken personally. I get quite a few requests from Pradhan. And this is to be understood. The designation, they have a very, this must be a very important designation they have. Due regards. The designation is instigator. Integrator, okay, integrator.
No, you chatted about that.
Okay. No, I can't understand this, tell you honestly. I understand CEO, department head, GM, whatever. And believe me honestly, this is good content, but I don't go beyond the byline and the affiliation of the person. Now, you have to also talk in the language which is mainstream, which is understood without making an effort.
Absolutely.
It may be great designation, but maybe you can have a dual designation, one for the masses, for
But
communication.
I can give you one example of a fantastic designation. So this is a geographically organized NGO which had various levels, right? So there was a state head and there was a district head and then they had a block head. So, I mean, one needs to communicate more clearly.
Right.
I'm also called chief integrator in my organization, so I'm like turning away
No, but then please put in a line explaining what that means.
what it means.
Of course, we come across great designations, chief people officer, chief happiness officer.
Yes.
But those are, we can understand that language at least.
Yes.
There are those designations.
No, I buy that logic totally because I
My
think.
friends there, please don't complain.
No, I'm not complaining. I've complained, so that's okay. I was
we
looking
have
for
too
some
many
support.
terms. I think we have too many terms.
Too many
Happiness के
terms,
लिए
but
officer
at least
चाहिए.
they're intelligible.
Yeah, I mean accessibility is important in language. Yes.
Keep it simple is also important, right? Any other points? I just want to share an anecdote because we assume, sorry, apologies, please, ma'am.
Yeah. Hello everyone. I'm from Sneha, Mumbai, and particularly working on maternal and child health. We have a program which is focusing on sustainability. So it is an indirect program which chooses volunteers from the community itself to spread awareness and knowledge related to whatever indicators we are working on. Regarding this, what challenges we are facing is we are not promoting our work or our brand, whatever we have. We don't tell them that we are doing it for you. Ultimately, we are monitoring their work, what these volunteers are doing in the community, but they are doing it for their own benefit. So we don't promote our work over here. But again, coming to your point, it is very important somewhere to let this work get a recognition or significance in order to even the community know its importance. So how do we maintain the balance?
So in terms of maintaining the balance, both for CSOs and media, I want to make this very clear. Performance metrics tend to be important because we operate in this existing structure. So with your funders, or if you're a CSO with your funders, you will have certain metrics. If you're the media with your audience, you'll have certain metrics. The second is your values, right? So that balance that you maintain where you may not want to self-promote and talk about your brand, but you do want to talk about the work. Have your volunteers document their experience and talk about how rewarding it was for them or what problems they saw. It just doesn't just have to be a testimonial. Have the community talk about the impact it had in their lives. Share those stories, and you don't need big budgets for this. Everyone has access to an Instagram account today, in the urban setting at least. In rural areas, we know digital penetration isn't that great, but there's radio there. So start small, start with the community. As we said, communities existed before CSOs and brands and media. We don't need to build communities, we just need to amplify what they already have to say. So you could start there. I hope that helps.
We have a professor from University of Houston, Marketing and Comms. Dr. Partha, what's your question? Question or comment, any?
Yeah, I have a question, which is, I understand the value of putting your work out, telling the stories. Clearly, it's very important. But one of the primary things that you have to keep in mind when it comes to communications is that why are you doing this one and for who you are doing this one. So the mission and the market that people talk about. So before one gets into the techniques like Instagram or writing stories or whatever else the case might be, going to a community radio station or finding out the format of that particular communication. So what would be the larger objective in telling the story, and for whom do you suggest that the stories are meant for? Whose consumption?
I can quickly take that, and then others can add. I'm speaking just for myself. Why, say, my organization QueerBee tells story, the larger mission is to create inclusive society. How do you create inclusive society? By creating inclusive public discourse. Inclusive public discourse means inclusive conversations. People then understand each other's values, where you are coming from, what are the differences, creating more tolerance, things like that, which generally doesn't happen if the public discourse is not inclusive. And then, as I said earlier, it creates a path, a process through which the society becomes more inclusive, and inclusive society is a better society. That's where I'm coming from.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to add in terms of the values of the organization, and a specific comment there is that, as an organization, we clearly believe that all our effort is, bottom up and community led. So everything that we do or say out there is always seen from the point of view of the community. But I think you subtly kind of build in how you have kind of encouraged that and made that happen. I think you never take away the ownership from the community, defining both their future and vision for a better life, and also how they are proposing to do it. So I think in that sense, in a lot of programs also that are held, you might see a lot of our people sitting, in the audience and not necessarily on the stage, while they may have facilitated communication of that work. So in that sense, I think the fact that the ownership always rests with the community and making it happen, I think is something that we believe is the only way to go, because otherwise it's not sustainable. The moment you try and take ownership of that change or that vision, then it becomes your baby rather than the community's vision.
Thank you. Charu, who should be sitting here actually, but for a clashing session. Charu, over to you.
No, thank you. It was really interesting hearing all of you, and every word kind of resonated, of course. And just a few minutes back, I had this conversation about some of the organizations, some of the people sitting in the room said they do not open emails related to awards. And this is exactly what the point was, that, you need to talk about your work. But my question to you is that, we use stories to talk about things, to talk about the kind of work which is happening, the impact. But how come we are not leveraging stories as much to bridge the information asymmetry gap? So, how do we do that? Or is that something which is really not, there's no appetite for that?
So I'm going to take that. So actually, with the work we do in TB, the work I do with the grassroots organization, we use stories as one, a means of empowerment, and to let sort of other people know who are going through this, that they're not alone, and two, for awareness. So that information gap and that information asymmetry that exists, we work with survivors and other experts in the field, let's say clinicians or health providers, ASHA workers, the government, to sort of bring you all aspects of, let's say it's TB diagnosis, right? What's the lived experience like? The centers are here and there, fine. Okay, you have that information. But what kind of things do you need in place to go get a test? What would you have to do after that? So we use storytelling as a means, as Ankur said, right? People don't remember facts, but they remember story. And it's very hard to get people to care about TB. Like I said, someone thinks it's smallpox, someone thinks it's polio, someone thinks it only happens to poor people, who cares? So making that sell, quote unquote, is very difficult. And the only way you can do that is by putting a story to the facts that you need to tell, not in any way manipulating or distorting, but just for the data and the story to go hand in hand to tell a compelling narrative on this is what you need to know. And also to have clear takeaways, that thing we say, call to action. What do you want them to do with that information? Because information is available at your fingertips instantly today. But that information in context, that knowledge or that awareness or whatever your call to action is, that's important. Thank you.
Okay, I think we should let everybody go. Rajiv already threatened me. We have kept him the whole day here. Ashna, I know you've been around too. And,
Rajiv's had his lunch. He wanted the lunch, so he's.
No,
You didn't. You said it was very good lunch just now. You said.
Yeah. Can we have a huge round of applause for Shiv and Anju, please?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for coming and listening. And fantastic. I'm absolutely sure I'm going to meet you folks in different ways.